At Christmas dinner, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're both grounded," like I was still 16 instead of 32. Like my daughter Julia wasn't sitting right there watching her grandfather lose his mind over absolutely nothing. The dining room went silent. 20 people, cousins, aunts, uncles. My younger brother, Trevor, with his new fiancée, all frozen mid-chew, forks hovering over Mom's famous honey-glazed ham. The crystal chandelier above us suddenly felt too bright. The room too small. I could feel my face burning. That old familiar shame creeping up my neck like it always did when Dad decided to remind everyone who ran this family. Julia's hand found mine under the table, her little fingers squeezing tight. She was 7 years old and she'd just watched her grandfather humiliate her mother in front of the entire family. Again, Howard. "Maybe we should," my mother started. But Dad cut her off with one raised hand. Howard Castellano didn't get interrupted. Not in his house, not at his table, not when he was paying for everything. Empty room. "Both of you now." His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. When Dad yelled, you could fight back. When he went quiet like this, cold and controlled, you knew he meant business. "You need to learn your place, Sabrina. And apparently, so does your daughter." Mom nodded, actually nodded, like this was perfectly reasonable. Like banishing your daughter and granddaughter to eat Christmas dinner alone in the sunroom was just good parenting. "Thanks," I said, standing up slowly, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "We've already eaten." Twas a lie. Julia had barely touched her food, but I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. I took Julia's hand and walked out of that dining room with my head high. Past the Rothko on the wall that cost more than most people's houses. Past the marble sculpture Mom bought in Florence. Past all the expensive bullshit that was supposed to prove we were better than everyone else. The sunroom was freezing, of course. No heat, no decorations. Just glass walls, looking out at the pristine snow-covered gardens and the Olympic-sized pool covered for winter. I could hear laughter drifting from the dining room, the party continuing without us like we'd never been there at all. Julia sat on the wicker sofa and pulled her knees to her chest. She didn't cry. She never cried anymore, and that broke my heart more than anything. "Mommy, why does Grandpa hate us?" she asked, and I didn't have a good answer because I'd been asking myself this same question for 32 years. What I did know was this. 2 hours from now, I was going to make one phone call. And my parents were going to wish they'd never treated us like garbage. They were going to wish they'd been kinder, smarter, less arrogant. But by then, it would be too late, see? Here's what nobody at that dinner table knew. I'd been planning this for 6 months. Every insult, every dismissal, every time Dad reminded me that I was living in his guest house. Driving his car, existing on his generosity, I'd been taking notes, building a case, waiting for the perfect moment. And they just handed it to me on a silver platter. My name is Sabrina Castellano. And this is the story of how I destroyed my family's empire with one phone call. All because they couldn't treat a little girl with basic human decency. It started 6 months ago. In June, when I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I've gone to the main house to pick up Julia from one of Mom's cultural enrichment afternoons, which basically meant forcing us to appreciate opera and French Impressionism. And I'd walked in on Dad in his study, door half open, voice raised. He was on the phone, and he was panicking. I'd never heard Howard Castellano panic before. The man once closed a $40 million real estate deal while having a kidney stone. Panic wasn't in his vocabulary. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying, pacing behind his massive oak desk. "Make it disappear. Bury it. I've got the mayor's office, I've got planning and zoning, I've got everyone I need in my pocket. This does not come out. Do you understand me, Vincent? This does not come out." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, barely breathing. Vincent Torelli, Dad's oldest friend, his college roommate, his business partner in half a dozen ventures. If Dad was worried enough to bring Vincent into something, it was serious. "The Riverside project cannot fall apart," Dad continued. "We've got $200 million in pre-sales. If the environmental report goes public, if anyone finds out what we buried in those soil samples, we're done. The whole thing collapses. I'm not losing everything because some graduate student at the EPA thinks they're going to save the world. My heart started pounding. The Riverside Project. Dad's crown jewel, his legacy development luxury condos on the Seattle waterfront. 40 stories of glass and steel that were supposed to cement the Castellano name in this city forever. Pre-sales had been insane. Every tech executive and Amazon VP with money to burn had bought in. It was going to make Dad not just wealthy, but generational wealthy, powerful, untouchable. Except apparently it was built on contaminated land. And Dad knew, and he was covering it up. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do with this information yet, but I knew it was important. I knew it was leverage. I just didn't know I'd need it quite so soon. The thing is, I hadn't always been the family disappointment. Once upon a time, I was the golden child. Straight A's at Lakeside, captain of the debate team. Early acceptance to Stanford. I was supposed to be the one who took over the family business. Who made Dad proud. Who proved that girls could run empires just as well as boys. Then I met Daniel Rivera my sophomore year. Daniel was everything my parents hated. Working class. First-generation college student, studying social work instead of business or law. His dad was a carpenter. His mom cleaned houses. He wore thrift store clothes and rode a beat-up bicycle and talked about economic justice like it meant something. I fell so hard for him, it was embarrassing. We got married right after graduation, and I got pregnant immediately. Dad told me I was throwing my life away. Mom said I was being selfish and stupid. Trevor, who was only 14 at the time, didn't say anything. He just watched and learned that disappointing Howard Castellano meant losing everything. They weren't wrong about the marriage. Daniel and I were a disaster. Turns out loving someone isn't enough when you've been raised in completely different worlds. We fought about money constantly. He thought I was spoiled and out of touch. I thought he was judgmental and self-righteous. We were both right. The marriage lasted for years, just long enough for Julia to remember her dad before he left, after the divorce. I had no choice but to come crawling back to my parents. No degree dropped out to have Julia no job experience. No skills except knowing which fork to use at fancy dinners. Dad loved it. He set me up in the guest house on their estate, gave me an allowance, made sure I understood that every dollar, every meal, every piece of clothing on my daughter's back was his generosity. I was 32 years old and I had less freedom than I did in high school. But here's what Dad didn't know. I might not have finished Stanford, but I spent 4 years learning from the best. I knew how to research. I knew how to build a case. I knew how to find information that people wanted to keep hidden. And I'd spent 6 months doing exactly that. The environmental report Dad was trying to bury. I found it. Took me 3 weeks of digging through county records and making friends with a very helpful clerk at the Environmental Services Office, who liked to complain about corrupt developers over happy hour drinks. The report was damning. The Riverside site had been a manufacturing plant in the 50s and 60s, making industrial solvents. When the plant closed in 1972, they'd just abandoned everything: tanks, chemicals, contaminated soil, the whole 9 yards. Some minimal cleanup happened in the 80s, but nowhere near enough. The soil was still toxic. Building residential units there wasn't just sketchy, it was dangerous. But Dad had friends everywhere. The report got revised. The EPA investigator got reassigned to Alaska. The whole thing went away officially. $200 million in pre-sales, hundreds of families planning to move into those luxury condos. And none of them knew they'd be living on poisoned ground. That was when I decided. Not when Dad humiliated me at family dinners. Not when Mom made passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my parenting or my failure to land another husband. Not even when they treated Julia like an inconvenience instead of their granddaughter. I decided when I realized they were willing to hurt hundreds of people, to poison families, to risk lives. Just to add a few more zeros to their net worth, I spent the next 4 months preparing. I made copies of everything the original environmental report. Emails between Dad and Vincent about the cover-up. Financial records showing payments to city officials. The whole paper trail. I sent it all to a journalist I'd gone to high school with, Rebecca Torres, who now worked at the Seattle Times doing investigative reporting. I met her at a coffee shop in Fremont, nowhere near my parents' neighborhood, and handed over a flash drive with everything. "This is insane, Sabrina," she'd said, scrolling through the files on her laptop. "This is front-page material. This could bring down half the city government." I nodded. My dad deserves it. And those families deserve to know what they're buying into. Rebecca looked at me carefully. "You know this is going to destroy your family, right? Your dad will know it came from you. There's no other explanation." Knew. God, I knew. But I was so tired. Tired of being small, of being controlled, of watching my daughter learn that her worth was tied to her grandfather's approval. I wanted her to see that you don't have to accept being treated like nothing. Sometimes you fight back. "Run the story," I told Rebecca. "Just give me a heads up before it goes live. I need to get Julia somewhere safe first." That was 3 days ago. Rebecca had called yesterday morning to say the story was ready, fact-checked and lawyer-approved. They were running it tomorrow, December 26th, the day after Christmas. Front page, full investigation, the whole thing. Which meant I had about 30 hours before my father's world exploded. I just didn't expect him to give me such a perfect final insult to remember him by. Sitting in that freezing sunroom with Julia, watching her try to be brave, I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I'd burn it all down. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca. "Run it tonight," I said quietly, walking to the far corner of the room so Julia couldn't hear. "Change the publication date to today. I don't care if it's Christmas. Run it now." Rebecca hesitated. "Sabrina, are you sure?" "Once this is out there, I'm sure. They just banished a 7-year-old to eat Christmas dinner alone. I'm done." Could hear her typing. "Okay, give me 2 hours to get it uploaded and live. The website version will go up first. Print edition tomorrow. Are you and Julia somewhere safe?" I looked around the sunroom, spat, the main house, beyond the glass, where my family was probably having dessert and opening presents without us. "We will be. 2 hours." I hung up and went back to Julia. "Baby, how would you like to go on an adventure?" Her eyes lit up. "What kind of adventure?" I smiled. "The kind where we don't have to spend another night in Grandpa's guest house. The kind where we make our own rules." I'd been planning this part too. I had money saved, not much, but enough. I'd been secretly selling some of the jewelry and designer bags my parents had given me over the years. Pieces I'd never worn because they felt like chains. I had friends from college who'd stayed in touch even after I married Daniel, even after my parents tried to isolate me. I had options. But first, I had to pack. I told Julia to wait in the sunroom and ran to the guest house, throwing clothes and essentials into suitcases as fast as I could. Documents, birth certificates, social security cards, Julia's medical records, my laptop with backup copies of everything I'd given Rebecca, just in case. Photos of Julia as a baby, the few happy memories I wanted to keep. Everything else, the designer clothes, the expensive furniture, all the trappings of the life my parents had built for me, I left behind that took me 40 minutes. When I got back to the sunroom, Julia was standing at the window watching snowfall. "Mommy, are we really leaving?" she asked. "We really are, sweetheart." She turned to me, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in months. Hope. "Will Grandpa be mad?" I knelt down and took her hands. "Grandpa is going to be very mad. But not at you. Never at you. This is grown-up stuff, okay? And I promise, where we're going, no one is going to make you feel bad for existing." She hugged me tight. "Okay, I trust you." We loaded the car, my car, technically Dad's car, but I was taking it anyway, and drove away from the estate. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might lose my nerve, and I'd come too far for that. I drove us to a hotel downtown. Nothing fancy, just clean and safe and anonymous. We checked in under my maiden name, well, my married name, Riverian settled into the room. Julia was asleep within minutes, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day. I sat by the window with my phone, watching the minutes tick by. At exactly 9 p.m., Rebecca texted, "It's live. Good luck, Sabrina. You did the right thing." I opened the Seattle Times website, and there it was. Top of the homepage, luxury waterfront development built on toxic waste. Castellano Group accused of cover-up. The article was devastating. Rebecca had done her job perfectly. Every detail, every document, every damning piece of evidence laid out for the world to see. By morning, it would be everywhere. My phone started ringing 10 minutes later. Dad, I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom, Trevor, Vincent. Numbers I didn't recognize. Probably reporters. I turned the phone off and sat in the dark, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find 63 missed calls and 47 text messages. Most were furious screeds from my father, threats about lawyers and disownment and how I'd destroyed the family. Mom's messages were somehow worse cold, disappointed. Saying she'd always known I was selfish, but she never thought I'd stoop this low. Trevor sent one message. "What the hell did you do?" The one that surprised me was from Vincent Torelli. "We need to talk. This isn't what you think it is." I almost laughed. Even now they were trying to spin it to control the narrative. But it was too late. The story was out there. The city had already announced an investigation. The mayor's office was scrambling to distance themselves from Dad. Presale buyers were filing lawsuits. The Castellano empire was crumbling, and I'd lit the match. Julia and I spent the day at the Science Center. Then got pizza at her favorite place in Capitol Hill. She didn't ask about Grandpa or the house or what happened next. She was just happy, genuinely happy for the first time in months. That night, back at the hotel, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sabrina Castellano. A woman's voice, professional but warm. "My name is Patricia Gonzalez. I'm an attorney with the Environmental Protection Agency. I was hoping we could meet tomorrow to discuss your father's business practices. We have some questions, and we believe you might have additional information that could help our investigation." I smiled. I'd be happy to help. We set up a meeting for the next afternoon. After I hung up, I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of my father's anger or my mother's judgment or losing their approval. I'd already lost it all, and I was still standing. Better than standing, I was free. But freedom came with a price, and I was about to find out just how high that price would be. Because what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my father's corruption ran deeper than environmental cover-ups and bribed officials. There were secrets in the Castellano family that made toxic soil look like nothing. And by exposing Dad's crimes, I'd just painted a target on my back that I didn't even know existed. The real danger wasn't the empire I destroyed. It was what would rise from the ashes. 3 days after Christmas, I met Patricia Gonzalez at a cafe in Belltown, far from anywhere my family would think to look. She was mid-40s, sharpied, wearing a suit that meant business. She ordered black coffee and got straight to the point. "Your father is in serious trouble, Miss Rivera. The environmental violations alone could mean federal charges. But we think there's more. Financial irregularities, fraudulent documents, a pattern of corruption that goes back decades. We need someone on the inside willing to testify." I stirred my latte, considering. What kind of protection are we talking about? I have a daughter. If I do this, if I testify, my father will come after me with everything he has. Patricia nodded. "We can offer witness protection if it comes to that, but honestly, I don't think it will. Your father's lawyers are already reaching out about plea deals. The man is 73 years old. He's not going to risk dying in prison. He'll take a deal, pay the fines, probably serve minimal time, if any. White-collar crime rarely gets the punishment it deserves, unfortunately." That should have made me feel better, but it didn't, 'cause I knew my father. And Howard Castellano didn't just roll over and accept defeat. If he was talking about plea deals, it meant he was planning something else. Something worse. "I'll testify," I said. But I need something from you first. I need to know everything you know about my father's business. Not just Riverside, everything. Krisha hesitated. That's not really how this works. I just handed you a federal case on a silver platter. I think you owe me some honesty. She studied me for a long moment, then pulled out a tablet. Okay? But this doesn't leave this table, understood? We're still building the case. What she showed me made my blood run cold. Riverside wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. My father had been cutting corners, bribing officials, and endangering people for over 20 years. A shopping complex built on unstable ground that collapsed in an earthquake, killing 3 people. A residential tower with faulty electrical systems that caused a fire. An office building with asbestos that was never properly removed. Every single time. Dad had covered it up, paid off inspectors, settled lawsuits quietly, and moved on. And Vincent Torelli had been involved in every single one. Vincent, I breathed. He's not just Dad's friend. He's his fixer, Patricia nodded. Vincent Torelli is a very dangerous man, Sabrina. He has connections we're still trying to map out. Political, criminal, international. Your father might be the face of the operation, but Vincent is the one who makes the hard problems disappear. And I do mean disappear. I thought about Vincent's message. This isn't what you think it is. Chill ran down my spine. What do you mean, disappear? We've been investigating 3 deaths connected to your father's projects over the years. People who were going to talk, who had evidence, who threatened to expose him. They all died in accidents. Car crashes, falls, one apparent suicide. We can't prove Vincent was involved, but the timing is suspicious. I felt sick. This wasn't just white-collar crime anymore. This was something else entirely. My mother, I said slowly. Does she know? Patricia shook her head. We don't think so. Everything we found suggests your father kept her in the dark. She benefited from the money, sure, but she wasn't part of the criminal enterprise. That tracked? Mom was a lot of things, cold, judgmental, materialistic, but she wasn't a criminal. She was just a woman who'd married money and never asked questions about where it came from. I left the meeting with more questions than answers. Patricia had given me her card and told me to call if I remembered anything else, if I felt threatened, if anything seemed off. I promised I would. But when I got back to the hotel, there was a message waiting at the front desk. A hotel envelope with my name on it, handwritten in elegant script. Inside was a note on expensive cardstock. Sabrina, we need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Come alone. The address is below. This is about Julia's safety. My hands were shaking. Vincent, he knew where I was staying. He knew I was alone with Julia, and he was threatening my daughter. I called Patricia immediately. He found me. Vincent Torelli. He left a note. He wants to meet. Don't go, she said sharply. It's a trap. We can put you in protective custody right now. He mentioned Julia. He said it's about her safety. I could hear Patricia cursing under her breath. Sabrina, listen to me very carefully. Men like Vincent Torelli don't make vague threats. If he says it's about your daughter's safety, he means he can get to her. But meeting him alone is suicide. Then come with me. Wire me up, follow me, I don't care. But I have to know what he wants. We argued for 10 more minutes before Patricia finally agreed. The meeting was set for noon the next day at a warehouse in Georgetown, one of Seattle's industrial neighborhoods. Patricia would have agents nearby, I'd wear a wire, and if anything went wrong, they'd move in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 3 deaths, those accidents. I thought about the people who'd tried to expose my father and ended up dead. I thought about Julia sleeping peacefully in the next bed, trusting that I'd keep her safe. I'd started this because I wanted justice. Now I was realizing justice might cost more than I was willing to pay. The next morning, I dropped Julia off with my college friend Rachel, telling her I had a meeting and I'd be back in a few hours. Rachel didn't ask questions. She'd been one of the few people who stayed loyal after my divorce, and I was grateful. Patricia picked me up 2 blocks from Rachel's apartment. In the car, she fitted me with a wire, tested the audio, and went over the plan again. You go in, you listen to what he has to say, you do not agree to anything. We'll be right outside. If you say the word understanding, we come in immediately. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect. Concrete, grimy, windows covered in grime. Vincent's black Mercedes was already parked outside. I took a deep breath and walked in. He was waiting in the middle of the empty space, hands in the pockets of his expensive coat, looking calm and collected. Sabrina, thank you for coming. You threatened my daughter. I didn't have much choice. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't threaten anyone. I said we needed to talk about her safety. There's a difference than talk. Vincent walked in a slow circle, his footsteps echoing. Your father is a complicated man. You know that. He's made mistakes, sure, but he's also built an empire. He's provided for your family, given you opportunities most people only dream about. And you've repaid him by destroying everything he worked for. He repaid me by treating me like property, by building luxury condos on poisoned ground, by hurting people for profit. Vincent waved a hand dismissively. Everyone hurts people for profit, Sabrina. That's how capitalism works. The difference is most people are smart enough not to burn down their own house. What do you want, Vincent? He stopped circling and looked at me directly. I want you to make this go away. Call your journalist friend. Tell her you made a mistake, that you were angry at your father and exaggerated. Recant your testimony with the EPA. Make this disappear, and I'll make sure you and Julia are taken care of. A trust fund, enough money that you'll never have to worry again. You can disappear, start over somewhere new. Everyone wins. Almost laughed. Except the hundreds of families who bought into Riverside. Except the people who died in Dad's other projects. Except everyone he's ever screwed over to make $1. Those people made their own choices, Vincent said coldly. No one forced them to buy luxury condos. No one forced them to work in buildings they didn't inspect themselves. Personal responsibility, Sabrina. It's a thing. And what if I say no? His expression hardened. Then I can't guarantee Julia's safety. The world is a dangerous place. Children get hurt every day. Accidents happen. There it was. The explicit threat. I felt rage burning in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. You would hurt a 7-year-old girl to protect my father's reputation. I would do what's necessary to protect my interests. Your father and I have built something that goes far beyond Riverside. We have partnerships, investments, connections that span the globe. You think exposing one toxic development is going to bring us down? You're delusional. All you've done is make yourself a problem that needs to be solved. Like those other 3 people, the ones who died in convenient accidents. Vincent's eyes flickered just for a second, but I saw it. Surprised that I knew. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. And so does the FBI. They've been investigating you for months, Vincent. Did you really think they wouldn't notice the pattern? It was a bluff. Patricia hadn't mentioned the FBI, but it landed. Vincent's jaw tightened. You're in over your head, little girl. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A criminal who murders people to protect his bottom line. A coward who threatens children because he can't win a fair fight. I paused. And I know you're finished. Even if something happens to me, the evidence is everywhere. Rebecca has it, the EPA has it, the Seattle Times has it backed up on servers you'll never touch. You can kill me, you can hurt Julia, but it won't matter. You've already lost. Vincent stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. You really think you're the hero of this story, don't you? You think you're brave, standing up to the big bad men? But you're just a spoiled brat who never grew up, who threw a tantrum because Daddy didn't love her enough. You're right, I said quietly. I am spoiled. I am angry. But I'm also right. And that's what scares you. He took a step toward me, and I tensed. But before he could say anything else, the warehouse doors burst open. Federal agents poured in, guns drawn, shouting commands. Patricia was right behind them, and she looked furious. "Vincent Torelli, you're under arrest for making terroristic threats, conspiracy to commit fraud, and as a material witness in 3 homicide investigations. You have the right to remain silent." I watched them cuff him, watched his face contort with rage as he realized he'd been played. He'd confessed to knowing about the deaths, to threatening Julia, all of it caught on the wire. As they led him away, he looked back at me one last time. "Your father will never forgive you for this." "Good," I said. "I don't want his forgiveness." After giving my statement and having the wire removed, Patricia drove me back to Rachel's apartment. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave," she said. "Don't ever do anything like that again." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. "What happens now?" "Now we build the case. Vincent's arrest will put pressure on your father. He'll have to choose between protecting himself or protecting Vincent, and men like Howard Castellano always choose themselves. I guess we'll have a plea deal within a week." She was right. 5 days later, my father agreed to plead guilty to fraud, bribery, and environmental crimes. He'd pay $30 million in fines, serve 18 months in minimum security, and forfeit most of his assets. The Riverside project was canceled. The buyers refunded. The Castellano name, once synonymous with luxury and power in Seattle, was now synonymous with corruption. Mom called me once during this period. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "You've destroyed this family. Your father is going to prison. The house is being sold. Everything we've built is gone." "Everything you built was a lie," I replied. "And yeah, Mom, I am happy. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not complicit in hurting people just to maintain some fantasy of superiority." She hung up. I never heard from her again. Trevor reached out, surprisingly. We met for coffee, neutral territory, and he was different than I expected. Quieter, thoughtful. "I always knew something was wrong," he admitted. "The way Dad operated, the things he'd say when he thought no one was listening. But I was a coward. I looked the other way because it was easier." "You were a kid," I said. "You didn't have a choice." "Maybe, but I'm 28 now. I've had choices for a while, and I kept making the wrong ones." He paused. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Julia deserves better than to grow up thinking this is normal." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd get, and I took it. 6 weeks after Christmas, I used the last of my savings to put a deposit on a small house in Ballard. Nothing fancy, but ours. I got a job at a nonprofit helping domestic violence survivors navigate legal systems turned out my incomplete. Stanford education and my experience dealing with controlling men actually qualified me for something useful. Julia started at a public school and loved it. She made friends, joined soccer, stopped flinching every time an adult raised their voice. One Saturday in March, we were planting flowers in our tiny front yard when a car pulled up. I tensed automatically, but it was just Rebecca from the Times. "Hey," she said, getting out. "I wanted to give you this in person." She handed me a newspaper. The headline read, "EPA investigation leads to sweeping reforms. New protections for homebuyers following Castellano scandal." "Your story didn't just take down your father," Rebecca said. "It changed policy. Because of you, there are new regulations requiring independent environmental reviews for all residential developments. Stricter oversight, harsher penalties for fraud. You've probably saved lives, Sabrina." I looked at Julia, who was carefully patting dirt around a tulip bulb, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "I just wanted my daughter to see that you don't have to accept being treated like nothing." Well, she saw that and more. Rebecca smiled. "You should be proud." After she left, Julia looked up at me. "Mommy, was that about Grandpa?" I nodded. "Yeah, baby." It was. She thought for a moment. "I'm glad we don't live with him anymore. I like our house better." "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." That night, after Julia was asleep, I sat on our tiny porch with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had happened. I thought about Christmas dinner, about that cold sunroom, about the moment I decided enough was enough. I thought about Patricia telling me I was brave and stupid. I thought about Vincent in handcuffs, my father's plea deal, a mother's cold fury, and I thought about Julia sleeping peacefully inside our small, modest, honest home. No more estate, no more allowance, no more strings attached to every dollar. Just us, building a life that didn't require hurting anyone else to maintain. My phone buzzed with an email. It was from a lawyer I didn't recognize. Subject line: Estate of Howard Castellano. My heart sank. I opened it, expecting some final punishment. Some last act of revenge from beyond my father's soon-to-be prison cell. Instead, it was something I never expected. Dear Ms. Rivera, I am writing to inform you that your father has established a trust fund for his granddaughter, Julia Marie Rivera, in the amount of $5 million. The funds are to be held in trust until her 18th birthday, managed by an independent trustee, and cannot be accessed or controlled by any member of the Castellano family. Your father wanted you to know that while he cannot forgive you for your actions, he recognizes that Julia is innocent and deserves to have opportunities in life. The trust is irrevocable and will be funded regardless of the outcome of his legal proceedings. I read it 3 times, not believing it. $5 million for Julia. Enough for college, enough to start a business, enough to build whatever life she wanted. And I couldn't touch it, couldn't control it, couldn't use it as leverage. It was purely for her. Maybe Howard Castellano was capable of love after all, in his own twisted, conditional way. Or maybe he just couldn't stand the thought of his granddaughter growing up without the Castellano money. Either way, it didn't matter. Julia would have choices I never had. And she'd have them without strings attached. I sat there on the porch until the wine was gone and the stars were bright overhead, thinking about revenge and justice and whether they were really the same thing. I'd set out to destroy my father's empire, and I'd succeeded. But I'd also built something in the ruins. A life where Julia could grow up knowing that integrity mattered more than money. That standing up for what's right was worth the cost. That you don't have to accept cruelty just because it comes from family 2 months later. I was in court to watch my father's sentencing. 18 months in minimum security, just like the plea deal promised. He looked old, diminished in his orange jumpsuit. Nothing like the powerful man who dominated every room he entered. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and for just a second I saw something that might have been respect. Or maybe just resignation. Vincent got 15 years. The evidence from the wire, combined with financial records and witness testimony, had been enough to tie him to the 3 suspicious deaths. He'd never see the outside of a real prison, and I slept better knowing that. Mom was sitting in the gallery, stone-faced, refusing to look at me. Trevor was there too, sitting on my side of the courtroom. Small gestures, but they mattered. After the sentencing, as I was walking to my car, Trevor caught up with me. Hey, I'm selling my condo. Figured I don't need 3,000 square feet of unnecessary space just to prove I'm successful. I smiled. What are you going to do instead? Grad school, maybe? Social work. He shrugged. Somebody told me once that it's possible to build something that doesn't require hurting people. Thought I'd give it a try. Good luck, I said, and I meant it. Life settled into something approaching normal. Julia thrived, I thrived, and slowly I stopped looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started dating again, nothing serious. Just coffee with a guy from work who made me laugh and didn't care that I came with baggage and a 7-year-old.1 year to the day after that Christmas dinner. Julia and I made our own tradition. We volunteered at a shelter, serving meals to families who had nowhere else to go. Afterward, we came home to our little house and made hot chocolate and watched movies until we fell asleep on the couch. No crystal chandeliers, no designer clothes, no toxic family dynamics. Just us, happy and free, and building something real. Mommy? Julia said sleepily, curled up against me. I'm glad we left Grandpa's house. Me too, baby. You think he's sad? In prison. I thought about that. Probably. But sometimes people need to be sad to understand what they did wrong. Do you think he understands? I kissed the top of her head. I don't know. But it doesn't matter anymore. We understand, and that's enough. She fell asleep like that, trusting and safe, and I realized that was the real revenge. Not destroying my father's empire, not sending him to prison, not exposing his crimes. The real revenge was this: building a life so much better than the one he'd offered that I never looked back, never regretted it, never wished for a single moment that I'd stayed quiet. Howard Castellano had spent his whole life believing that power and money were the only things that mattered, that you could buy your way out of consequences. That cruelty was just strength under another name. That family loyalty meant accepting whatever he dished out without question. I'd proven him wrong on every count. And Julia would grow up knowing that you don't measure your worth by your grandfather's bank account, that you don't have to sacrifice your integrity to be successful, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything you've ever known and build something better from scratch.
Before you click away, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm grateful you spent these moments with me. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Another powerful story is coming soon. Until then, take care, stay strong, and keep going.